It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Ms. Bray Patrick-Lake is Director of Stakeholder Engagement at the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative and Director of Patient Engagement at the Duke CTSA. She supports efforts to actively engage participant partners in Duke research programs, as well as patient advocacy organizations and other stakeholders in CTTI efforts to improve clinical trials. She implements strategies to enhance awareness of Duke CTSA and CTTI's work, particularly with patient advocates, and extend its impact by working in partnership with the patient advocacy community on research design and conduct and improvement of the clinical trial enterprise. Ms. Patrick-Lake also currently serves as the co-chair of the advisory committee to the NIH Director of Precision Medicine Working Group. In 2010, Ms. Patrick-Lake founded the PFO Research Foundation in response to the lack of definitive scientific information regarding the condition of patent corneal ovale after being a patient in an aborted clinical trial. Ms. Patrick-Lake has served as a patient representative at the FDA on a variety of advisory committees and panels, in work groups for EMA and NIH, as a guest lecturer and an external reviewer for IOM, and as a patient stakeholder or co-investigator for AHRQ and PCORI grants. She's a member of the PCORNet Coordinating Center's Executive Leadership Committee, where she develops patient engagement strategies. MD EpiNet's National Medical Device Registry Task Force, MDIC's Patient-Centered Benefit Risk Steering Committee, ACC Foundation's Patient-Centered Care PC3 Shared Decision-Making Work Group, the DIA's Patient Fellowship Selection Committee, the DVT Registry Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and is board member for the Alliance for Headache Disordered Advocacy. She holds a BS in zoology from the University of Georgia and a Master's of Forensic Science degree from National University in La Jolla, California. Please join me in welcoming Bray Patrick-Lake.
Okay, so perhaps never has there better been a better reason to shorten your bio ever. Thank you. Okay, so it's Sunday night, and I am going to give a talk that's got good words and science and all that kind of stuff, but I also want us to have fun, so I just want to lay some ground rules. I think the bar is still open, and if you're in the bar, you have to bring me a drink as well. But I encourage you all to go. And what we're going to be talking about this evening as far as involving patients in clinical trials planning process is part of my personal story, and it'll be part based on work at the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative. So, with that said, this is the most important slide. I am an employee of Duke University. I work on a public-private partnership that is an FDA public-private partnership, and most of those folks would claim absolutely nothing that I have to say. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about my personal story. So in 2008, I joined a clinical trial. It was the ESCAPE clinical trial for PFO and migraine. Anybody work on the ESCAPE clinical trial by Safety Medical? No? Was that kind of a hand raise or no? Okay, good. Did you really raise your hand?
Yes.
You did. Okay. So here's what happened. I was a patient who was refractory to many migraine medications. I was having a miserable life, and I swear I was a totally normal person until my mid-30s after I had kids. And then I discovered I had a PFO that was shunting off the chart, and I really didn't know how it played into migraine. And I looked at all the options, and my cardiologist and my neurologist actually knew about clinical trials that they did not refer me to. So I'm actually the only person in our country that's ever self-referred off of ct.gov. So I went to clinicaltrials.gov and I self-referred. I enrolled in the ESCAPE clinical trial, and I ended up being randomized to the device arm, and I had an amazing result where I went from 11 migraines a month to 0 for 18 months, which is probably unheard of. So I'm probably some type of extraordinary responder. But I use social media, and I had been following the trial online before I'd actually joined the study, and I had set up a little Google alert about PFO and migraine and escape and anything. And one morning over breakfast with my kids, who I believe were about 2 and 4 at the time, I got a little ding on my cell phone, and I opened it up, and the escape trial had actually been aborted. And they had, the sponsor had announced it at a major scientific conference without ever contacting me, the patient in the clinical trial. And so I have a device in my heart for the rest of my life that I actually know absolutely nothing about, except for what I know on social media from the patients that I've been corresponding with. So It's an interesting thing because the patients that I've been online with did not have nearly as good results as I did. They also did not have nearly as good a sight as I did. We had a neurology investigator, we had cardiology investigators, and I can say hands down, mine were awesome and they communicated with me. And I reached out to this particular person who was my cardiologist and said, you know, I'm really dissatisfied that this happened and this trial got aborted. And how could this happen and how could you not get in touch with us? And he was like, I agree, and I think you guys have been wrong, and I understand, that you have these feelings. But we took a constructive approach about what I do as a patient, what could I learn. The results were never published, by the way, and so if it's a device trial, you can actually, once you withdraw the marketing application, you don't have to share the results with the patient. So those of us that actually have the device in front of our hearts, we don't know anything about what the sponsor found. But I will tell you, I know 5 people that I've connected with online who've actually had the device repaired, and I've had a significant residual shunt the whole time, but I'm doing well. I'm still on beta blockers and all kinds of crazy stuff. I had every adverse event known to man, but I felt like in my case, the risk, or the benefits actually outweigh the risk. But why did I feel that way? I felt that way because my investigators were 100% honest about what had happened. They shared all kinds of information with me, and so I really came into this knowing nothing about research, even though I have a master's in forensic science. I seriously didn't know that industry sponsors could actually do research. I honestly thought that NIH did all the research in the country. So, I think I probably knew a little more than other people, and then I got this eyes wide open approach. So, I was a little dissatisfied. A couple patients in the trial were not doing very well. I would actually say they were harmed. I reached out to this person, and he was great. He said, well, let's talk about it. How does research actually work? And this is somebody who's super busy, he's running a cath lab, he has no reason to actually explain this to me. But Dr. John Carroll at the University of Colorado Hospital actually opened that door and said, all right, let's see what we can do to make research better. Why did this trial fail? What could we have done? And when I looked at the inclusion-exclusion criteria, I could tell you as a patient with just an online group of people that there are like 5 people in the whole country that actually fit that criteria because it was so stringent. There was nobody out there that actually had done all this, and I also think that they probably fudged a little on a lot of us that actually got into the trial because there was no way you could actually get anybody in. So this investigator is actually responsible for helping me kind of have that right turn in my life as far as just being a normal person to actually becoming a research advocate and now working professionally in research. Here is the second crazy person, Dr. Rob Califf at Duke, who was he was our vice chancellor of research at the Duke Translational Medicine Institute. I ended up joining the FDA patient representative program after thinking the FDA was completely 110% evil after second to industry. And once I learned a little bit more, I started to understand that the FDA had very thoughtful people working there, and we all kind of wanted the same thing. And so I became a patient rep in the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative that I'll talk to you about in just a second. But Dr. Caleb actually invited me to not be a volunteer, but to become a staff member and to actually help think about how we could do greater patient engagement, how we could come up with a system that actually worked for all of us. And he really did this before it was cool, and before there was Aquarium, before it was funded. Deborah Roth was our COO of the Translational Medicine Institute. She's now the Associate Commissioner at FDA to him as far as being the Deputy Commissioner. I think there's a better than likely chance we'll end up being the nominee for the actual Commissioner job. And they really brought me on board and they gave me enough rope to hang myself, but then also really had a lot of forgiveness because there's so much about the research system that we just can't know. But as patients, we know we have a sense of urgency and we want to get things done and that we feel like we're all kind of working for the same thing. It's just lost in translation. So I think they have a lot of tolerance for that. So let's talk a little bit about what's driving patient engagement now. We've definitely seen a shift in NIH, and I think a lot of it, it's kind of interesting because people think that Clarity invented patient-centeredness just because they have a P in their name and they say, patient-centered, but there's been a lot of patient advocacy and patient work and certainly engagement in research for many years. But we had this little spike in the last year, patient-centered drug development. I had the benefit of working on the MPIC, Medical Device Innovation Consortium framework for patient preference around risk-benefit, 21st Century Cures, which passed the House this week. If anybody working on that, thank you. And now the Precision Medicine Initiative. But I'll speak to you about some survey results from Citi on patient engagement in clinical trials. And I love the honesty of this quote, where this person says, there is a whole trend of patient-driven outcomes like the CORE initiative. Now, every NIH-sponsored study wants to see advocates on the steering committee at the time of conceptual design. And for any of us who want federal funding, when NIH says jump, we jump. So this kind of reminds me of Sharon Terry from Genetic Alliance, her talk about how they actually developed all their research activities at Genetic Alliance, where it's like, well, the council come, we move the food, and then they came. So here we go. In March of this year, I had an interesting turn of events where I got named to be the co-chair of the advisory committee to the NIH director for precision medicine. I can tell you, I'm a normal person. I'm actually that person in college. I teach most of my classes. I showed up on Friday and I took the test. I work at Duke University, which they never really let me in a million years. So I've just had this whole like crazy, it's been a really crazy time. But the State of the Union address, the president, out of the blue, without Francis Collins or Kathy Hudson knowing exactly what he was going to say, announced the Precision Medicine Initiative. And nobody's tweeting this event, right? Or this is all, we're just all fun, right? Okay, good. So they were at Francis's house, sitting on the couch drinking beer, and waiting to see what he was going to say. And then everybody jumped up, spilled their beers, and he announced it. And then nobody heard what he say, so they had to go back and replay the video to see what he actually said. So, on January 30th, there was an event at the White House, and the president announced his whole vision for precision medicine. And I can tell you, so I've seen scripted speeches, I've seen people that are doing canned things and listening to an ear prompter. The president is 110% behind biomedical research. I truly believe that what we're hearing about funding commitments in the fall, that's not a bunch of baloney. Like, I really feel like we're getting close. And certainly commitments to precision medicine is exciting. So maybe I'm co-chairing because I'm the biggest idiot in the country that Francis Collins said, let's have 1 million volunteers in this cohort. I didn't think that sounded crazy. I actually think that if we do research right and we actually start with engagement and we start creating a community instead of us as researchers versus them as patients of the we, then we're going to get this research thing right and we're all going to come together. I can tell you the president is absolutely dead serious about the engagement piece of this. There was a meeting on Wednesday that Francis Collins, Kathy Hudson, and Rob Califf, the secretary, were at. And the president's basically like, if you guys, if you're going to skimp on this engagement thing, then you need to come back and you need to talk to me. And you need to explain why you're not doing all these things that we think we can do. So I really feel like engagement is here to stay. It's not going away. And hopefully I'm not going to be the one to screw it up. So I also want to share with you, there was a study that was recently done, and we presented these results last week at we had a participant engagement and health equity workshop at NIH for the Precision Medicine Initiative. And there was a study on public attitudes towards PMI. Basically, we explained PMI and then we explained what a large cohort study is. This cohort is a very patient-friendly word. Seriously, if you guys aren't laughing, you're not drinking enough. All right, I'm watching this. Okay. So we oversampled the underrepresented populations. And I think we did pretty good as far as making sure that we have people that were from low literacy backgrounds and also lower socioeconomic statuses. But guess what? 71% of the folks that were surveyed said that research participants and researchers should be equal partners in a study. This is America. This is people who've heard nothing about research. And so we wrote this study that really went through and explained what research is. 71% said we should all be equal partners. None of you guys are running from the room, so I'm going to take that as a good sign. Participants as partners, do you agree or disagree with the following statements? Research participants should help decide what kinds of research are appropriate. 62% agree. Help decide what to do with study results. Help choose what research questions to answer. Help collect study data. Help recruit other participants. Help design the study, and even help analyze the data. Cool, right? I think it's pretty cool because I don't think a lot of people know a lot about research, so I thought it was pretty cool. All right, let's shift back to the clinical trial system and get back to kind of where we are. So where we are, the current clinical trial system is broken, and patients, we, me, us, all of us are over it. So once you take a look under the curtain and you kind of see what's behind the curtain of eyes of clinical trials, you see the incredible waste of resources due to repetitive activities. I'm really fascinated when when hospital staff actually says, we really love that software that we were using for a study, can we keep it? Look, the study's done, we're packing it up, we're taking it home, I'm sorry. I know we spent years and millions of dollars actually setting this stuff up, but you can't use it anymore. Unnecessary delays due to bureaucracy, coming from a patient advocacy foundation where we could actually write a check and get something done in a week, to working at Duke, who is my employer, and I have great respect for them. I can tell you there's unnecessary delay due to bureaucracy. Recruitment and retention failures, we see that all the time. Data that can help patients remains inaccessible. I love the publications earlier this year. Actually, City has a project, it's called ACT, Aggregate Analysis of CTFF, once a year. We create a data set that's downloadable, analyzable. All of you can use it if you can use SAS. You can go in and you can do a snapshot of the portfolio of clinical trials. And then you can also see who's actually reporting their results and who's not. And I think you'd be a little shocked about that. So we did a little better job of actually getting the data out in the public space. And then half the time, the research doesn't even get disseminated or translated into any type of tool that I could use or my providers could use. So let's stop the nonsense, right? All right. So Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative formed in 2007, MOU from FDA and between Duke University that launched it actually to identify and promote practices that will increase the quality and efficiency of clinical trials. So it's a public-private partnership, but our sweet spot is really bringing all the stakeholders together, and I can tell you we have a lot of fun. Roger, I think you're involved in the project. So at City, we actually kind of shut the doors and we roll up our sleeves, and it's not like being at FDA going before an advisory committee hearing. It is actually really talking about what's going wrong and what we can all do, and understanding kind of perverse financial incentives, why people are maintaining non-value-added activities. And it becomes really clear. And I think having the patients in the room, there's a lot of accountability and there's a lot of, really, like where we get to say, I don't think that flies, and that's great that you're making a lot of money, but we shouldn't do that anymore. So this is our current membership. And I put the academic institutions on the bottom just to see what kind of guttural reaction you guys would feel to that, because usually patients are listed last. I wish you could see your faces right now. I'm totally kidding. You're thinking about it, and I love that. Okay. So anyway, we bring all the different stakeholders together to try to improve clinical trials. So here's kind of the method to our madness. We talk about the problem areas in clinical trials, and then we actually gather evidence. And being methodology folks, I'll speak to you about that a little. We identify solutions. We build consensus, which consensus can be kind of a pejorative, but I'll tell you, we do push each other to actually not have it just be the easiest thing we can live with, but really try to make change. We formulate recommendations, and then we make change. And we really had a focus on the implementation piece of this, because it's not enough, like white papers, seriously, that's a bad term in the city. We don't talk about just writing white papers. We really focus on what we can do, put tools in your hands that'll help you make a change. I don't know your name, but I really appreciate you, because you were on the airport van with me, and I got off I live in Colorado, and I was wearing like running clothes and no makeup, and I totally ignored everybody in the van with me, and sat there like this. I appreciate that you're smiling and nodding along. Okay, so here's the city methodology. Statement of problem. Identify research impediments, issue the statement, come up with a project plan, and we really do that all together, and I can tell you, even though you guys may be the scientific experts, when our patient partners come in and say, let's think about it this way, we really actually do that. Identify the gaps and barriers. We do look at across the ecosystem and the landscape. We'll do a literature review, multi-stakeholder meetings, surveys, and interviews, analyze and interpret findings, develop recommendations, and then disseminate and implement. And so we're really focused more on the workshops, the pilot studies, and then measuring impact, which is so hard when you're looking across a portfolio or an ecosystem. So I think we're still struggling a little bit there. But I can tell you just in the patient space, in the last couple of years, what I've seen, I've spoken at the Clinical Research Forum, I think 2 years in a row, Society of Clinical Trials, I did the CTSA review a number of years ago. I'm really feeling the genuine, we're starting to see the value of engaging patients and patient groups in research. We're not quite sure how to make the whole value case, but I do see the needle moving, and the rooms are filling up, and the dialogue is changing, and I'm really seeing a little more of that makes me sleep better at night. So this is our current portfolio of city projects. In red, I've highlighted the patient groups in clinical trials, which is what we're going to spend a good bit of our time speaking about. But we really do try to address issues on all kinds of study startup, study conduct, analysis and dissemination. Roger, you're part of the DUCP project, so data monitoring committee project, which we've got no shortage of issues on. And then we've done some specialty areas, and that's not because the city necessarily says these are things we attack, but with FDA as our partner and our funder, they can say, we really need your help in this area, and we'll take that on. So a key term for tonight's discussion is patient groups. And basically we've taken everything and we've lumped it all together. In the survey that I'll tell you about, we asked patient groups what they call themselves, and even though they had 20 choices, they still wrote in like 15 more. And so finally we said, you're all a patient group, and we're going to call it good. Okay, so here's the background. Patient groups are really changing in their activities as far as being involved in advocacy and certainly being involved in research. 1913, so with the American Cancer Society, they formed to raise disease awareness. We have had, people on the Hill, we've had people doing great things. We've had our walkathons, we've had all kinds of things, but now we've got this really interesting milestone-driven research. And it's kind of interesting to me that it's taken so long to actually catch on, that some groups have actually been doing some of these things for 25 years that have really been having an impact. We can all say, the HIV community, the breast cancer community. I come from the migraine community. Go online and you can find 400 migraine groups, but just this year we got our first patient registry. Really? Good job, guys. Okay, so I think we need to look at some of the things that groups, Michael J. Fox, you guys probably know that I love your work. They've been a member of City for a while, and just getting really smart. Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, tiny little group, and sitting down and going, okay, what are the pain points in research? What can we do to actually de-risk research? How do we take our assets? How do we leverage them? And then really apply them to translational research and actually make a difference. So we've seen some really cool things. I think cystic fibrosis, their work, the foundation's work has been cited over and over again. I'm really kind of thinking we're not going to see a lot of deals where people get $3 billion out of royalties going forward because industry got smart. So I admire what they did and I love the model, but I honestly think what Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy is doing as far as actually writing a therapy development guidance and kind of putting it in the hands of FDA and having FDA adopt most of that guidance is pretty darn brilliant. Okay, so we've got all these different groups that are coming to the clinical research enterprise, getting engaged in research, bringing their assets, but I also think there's still a real struggle in knowing which patient groups you actually partner with around clinical trial activities. I mean, we do see some that are doing amazing things, but then others are actually a Google group of 5. And it's hard for researchers to know that. There's a new model in the industry that Sanofi is actually promoting that I really like, where they have set up like a 1-800 hotline within their own company that will get back to somebody in a division of their company within 48 hours. Where basically you call in and say, here's my therapeutic business area. I'm working in this space. I want to engage with patients or patient groups around my protocol and my development program. Who's out there and what do I do? And they leave it to experts who can actually go and then do some type of research and do some type of assessment of the patient group's knowledge, skills, expertise, assets, and then bring it back to that division and say, look at these groups. There are a lot of consultants that are doing that. At Duke, we might have some interns that do it, or I might actually do it. But I think that this is a kind of an interesting thing. And so City at our project, we actually started to take this on. So really there's issues around engagement where I feel like the cultural shift, we've seen the shift in the mindset, but there's still a gap in knowledge and understanding about how actually to interact with patients around clinical trials and when. There's really no empirical evidence and certainly no guidelines or best practices until around 9 o'clock tonight. Nova's on, I'll try to get you guys all out of here. Okay, so actionable recommendations and metrics are needed, and the city's actually developed recommendations now. But our solution at City was the PGCT project, which actually is the longest project name in city history, best practices for effective engagement with patient groups around clinical trials. I'm going to stop here for 10 seconds if anybody needs a drink. I know I do. Go on over there.
What you want?
No, I'm joking. I'm thinking it's like Grey Goose Martini kind of thing. Sunday, I'm flying like 4 in the morning. All right. So patient groups and clinical trials project team members who formulated this plan. So first we had our patient leadership council at City, which was 18 different thought leaders. Michael J. Fox Foundation, Claire Marnier was actually one of these people. But we brought together industry, academia, FDA, lawyers, and really tried to decide, what do we need to do in this project. Please note on city staff on the very bottom, Jamie Roberts, we stole her from NINDS. So she did a lot of recruitment work and she's excellent, but I was also managing the recruitment project, which I then gave to Jamie because she's 100 times smarter than me. But she had a lot of influence over this project. So anyway, our project objectives when we set out were to do a literature review and survey to really kind of figure out, what's the landscape look like, what are the characteristics of patient groups, what are their activities, how are they applying their assets to the clinical trials enterprise, reach, infrastructure, missions. Then we really wanted to understand the successes and the failures and what are the current practices that are going on, what are the barriers, and then come up with some recommendations to share about how we can actually have more efficient and successful partnerships in clinical trials. Literature review conclusions are essentially nothing. I think that's the short side of it. There's one publication that I would recommend you read. It's Elaine Gallen et al. Forging Stronger Partnerships with Academic Medical Centers is the title, and I think that's worth reading. But what we've got in the literature is really a bunch of kind of mom and apple pie, good communication, be transparent, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to solve your problem as far as IP or anything with your institution. So we need to be a lot more practical with that. And everything was just, it's really just anecdote, but it's all a good idea, and we really don't know what the value is. So we did a survey in May and June of 2014. We ended up partnering with the Drug Information Association because we found out they were about to send out a survey and we didn't want to have survey fatigue across all the different institutions and organizations. So our survey set out to understand the characteristics and services around clinical trials of patient groups, objectives when working with patient groups, barriers to effective collaboration, and then metrics and value equation, if any. We made a lot of mistakes, and I have 125 pages of survey data, right? Like, is that a rookie mistake? Like, don't ever do that. Because you're trying to get it published, and it could be like 100 publications at this point. So we do have a manuscript submitted, and in the spirit of academia, that means I won't tell you a word about what we found until I get my high-impact journal. Okay. These are our methods. So for you, things that are important is that it did go out to the CTSA mailing list, and I think Clinical Research Forum also sent it out to its members. We sent it out to city members, DIA. It was an anonymous de-identified survey because we figured out that so many clinical research institutions or clinical research units within institutions or different departments of the industry all had different practices. And so we didn't feel that it was appropriate for one person at one company or one institution to speak and say, these are the practices. It's a weakness as far as publication because people want to know how did we do this and how did we actually get the link forwarded. And but I still feel like we were very happy with some of the information that we got back. Our sample size was, we were shooting for 200, we had 244, but we exited people out of the survey if they said they weren't working with patient groups and didn't intend to, so our sample went down. And then we had a data analysis plan that includes descriptive and inferential statistical analysis. I have absolutely no idea what that means. Okay, so here's what is important. The upshots from our conceptual model. See, you're laughing. What did you drink?
I'm just not a stitcher. That analysis, I'll take.
You were waiting for that one slide. All right, conceptual model of our insights from our surveys, and then we did qualitative interviews, and we had some overlap to kind of confirm or tease out things that were important in the survey that we didn't get enough information on. So as far as patient groups, and some of you might be thinking, I want to engage individual patients. That's great, and I will talk about that later, but patient groups, a lot of them actually have advocates that they'll send out. So we focused solely on patient groups, and we surveyed, interviewed our decision makers from patient groups. So you couldn't just be an individual advocate who happened to work for the National Breast Cancer Coalition's volunteer. You actually need to be a board member or an executive leadership in some way. So we got 61 patient groups, and most of their budgets range from $500,000 to $9 million a year. Although 13% actually have more than $100 million a year, which is like my fantasy. But I know what Michael J. Fox, you does $80 million a year. Here's the fun of working nonprofit too. Literally every year, January 1st, your budget goes back to zero, and then you get to go out and fundraise it all again, which is just scary. But I appreciate it. people actually still do that. Working in the PFO space where we've we've missed all of our primary endpoints of every clinical trial, and we've made no progress in the decade. Hands up for me, that's why I work for Duke. Okay. So academic investigators, we had 75. Most of them were MDs and PhDs working at academic medical centers that had CTSAs and schools of public health. And in industry, we really tried to cast our net far and wide, even hit device companies, but we ended up with primarily large pharma working in 5 therapies or more: oncology, CNS, CV, diabetes, rare and infectious diseases were the most prominent. So when we looked at our patient groups, we were able to kind of say, okay, what are your services? What are you working on? How do we categorize you? And we were able to break that down in patient support, education information, research, and political activity. So I have this red box that says See the City Framework, which I'll show you, but I just want to be careful to point out that you don't want to just work with organizations that are just working in research. Like I came to advocacy absolutely having no appreciation for politics or policy, but we can't get done what we need to do in biomedical research and clinical trials without all of this. So it really is a team sport, and I can't focus on that key point quite enough. Also, people can work in patient education and not know much about research at all, but they can have a tremendous mailing list. And if you make them a fan of your clinical trial and you make them a partner in developing it, they have reach that will go far and wide on behalf of your activity. So this is a model that we've been developing to help us actually evaluate the impact of patient groups in the clinical trials enterprise. And we changed the name from research and development continuum to, it's really a life cycle because we want to go bench to bedside and back. And then after we get a compound on one side, we actually want to see what else they'll do and we want to come back. So I really don't care if it's a continuum of life cycle, but our next version of this graphic will have an arrow coming back. But we really looked at what patient groups were doing and where they were making an impact. And so some of them were actually funding research and trials directly. The natural history database and the registry support, I think, is invaluable, as you guys probably know. I think Michael J. Fox, and I hate to, I'm going to keep calling you all night just because I know your work fairly intimately, but animal models, like, what do researchers need? Animal models, great, we'll have some. So really thinking about the different assets and the tools that they bring. The recruitment and retention piece is like such the duh. Like that's when everybody calls the patient group, hey, I created this study and I didn't consult with you and I don't know if the inclusion exclusion are good. I don't know if the study's feasible. I don't know what the burden of the protocol is, or they didn't even fly people across the United States with their 5 kids and come and do 7 appointments back to back. But could you recruit my study? So I just think that is like the duh, and that's like, don't even think about that at this point. So serving on a data safety monitoring board, people are like, why do patients ever even do that? Why do we need patients to do that? Well, we've actually had examples where patients, I think NINDS, maybe even NeuroNext, you guys had somebody where it's like, if we're dealing with a potentially fatal disease, we'll tell you that some of these adverse events we don't even care about. Like they're not a big deal, and that's particularly in the FDA space, I think that's really valuable. And then meaningful clinical endpoints. I think that's great, but I also encourage you guys to think about what can we do past that. I'm being a cardiac patient and a migraine patient. Clinical endpoints on the cardiology side are always stroke, death, or MI. If I don't have any of those, I kind of want to know what my life's going to be like. So could we do something else that will actually help us think about what's our life living past that day? So in our survey, prevalence and drivers of engagement, I'm going to speak to you mostly about our academic findings, but I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about industry, because honestly, I thought industry was engaging with patient groups more than academia was. So shout out to you guys. 70% of our academic respondents said they had been engaging with patient groups. Now, I don't know, what's the next word? So 64% reported being driven by opportunities to gain funding for national programs. So, at least you guys are honest that we work with patient groups, but maybe you have a reason. And then 23% were driven by opportunities to gain funding directly from patient groups. So industry respondents, again, we went from 119 to 43 very rapidly, and I honest to God feel like we oversampled in people that are actually doing this and actually have some type of belief in engaging with patient groups around clinical trials. Only 45%, and then I really love this, 41%. We don't even have any plans to do this in the future, we don't care. And then their approach was really driven by corporate culture and the therapeutic area and vertical business unit, which to me often boils down to one really super engaged individual who gets it. So we need to move probably past that. And I'll also remind you that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think we can really know that we need to do these things. But if your culture, whether it be institution or it's your organization, if you don't get past the cultural part, you're not going to go far. I'm going to share a couple of slides from the industry findings with you because I think this really illustrates our point on what we're trying to tip in this system. So 80% of the industry response are actually engaging in phase 3, but yet 15% are engaging in discovery and preclinical. So I would hope in a couple of years if we do the survey again, we find those numbers actually at least equal. But I think we'd be better served to be engaging earlier. We also asked what people were actually measuring around this, and 43% of the people said we're doing engagement, we're just not measuring anything. So kind of the, again, it does like recruitment and retention, and when we're looking at a piece of the project that I'll share more about, we're looking at that delta, we're looking at that change of 1 month we were recruiting and 7 patients a month, and we worked with a patient group, and after that, all those months you got 20 a month, then we could say that, okay, whatever you guys did is probably useful. But there's a real struggle around that, and it tends to be cycle time metrics, and can we shorten cycle time, and then the protocol amendments is actually more important than we probably all think, but I'll share some data with that in just a second. All right, so from the academic perspective, the barriers to engaging with PGs, I love it, again, lack of funding. You guys are like always there for the, yeah, really great. So, and I want to kind of end this, the us and the them. It's kind of a joke, but at some point we all need to become the we, and I think it's really easy to say us versus them as far as patient community researchers, and hopefully one day we're all going to be one. Misaligned objectives, priorities, and incentives. 52% cited that as a barrier to engagement. 42% said a lack of tools for engaging with PGs, which, I mean, God knows what you have to get from your institution to actually do it if you think it's a good idea. And then 33% saying lack of tools for actually identifying the group to work with. Here's a quick story from Duke. So I do the patient orientations on our Picori studies, and I work to try to get people contracted, and sometimes people will just be on a study advisory board, or we might have a focus group, but then they become a co-investigator. There's all these different roles that patients can play, and then it sends out all this nutty paperwork, right? So patients are not vendors, and so like, seriously, like, we had to create an alternate path, and like, I got like, it's like what, 100 pages of paperwork, right? It's like, I mean, it's insane. So it's not your W-9, but then it's like, sign this, did you get insurance, did you whatever, and as a patient, I'm done already. Like, I'm done after 5 pages, and it's not about me in any way. It's about institutional protection. So,
Our faculty love vendor agreements.
right? So, if you want to work with patients and patient groups, I mean, I think if it's, data sharing and IP, agreements are fine, but really think about the fit for purpose. And if you're just asking a patient to come in and help you develop a protocol, it's more of a focus group. Let's be really smart about what they give them. And please don't give them more than 10 pages. And I would actually encourage you to fill out most of it for them, explain it, and then have them sign it. So in academia, here was the training education that they're receiving as far as actually working with patient groups. So 34% actually no training. The 42% that are offering institutional training modules, I'd love to see those, and I would love to actually know if patients or patient groups help you develop those so we all know how to work together. And then the advice and training from patient reps who've done this. I probably take 1,000 calls a year from people going, hey, I'm thinking about engaging with patients, what do I do? And it would just be smarter if we all came up with some basic tools that we could share and we could stop duplicating. There are people that are actually doing it well, and we should share that information. So this is ranked by affiliation gap. Yellow shirt, do you want to explain what an affiliation is? All right. Negative impacts to patient group and academia relations. So in academic, the responses were in the red, and the patient groups are in blue. And so basically, even in the community of academia, you guys are saying our own bureaucratic processes internally are keeping us from engaging with patient groups. And then I think it's interesting that both perspectives from academia and the patient group said, we don't necessarily understand the benefits to partner with each other. or I should say the benefits to partnering with patient groups is the more accurate interpretation of this data. Unclear or ill-defined processes within the patient group of how to engage. They actually agreed, and very strongly, that they often didn't know how to get into a research partnership. Faster Cures has been working on the IP issues and indirect cost issues, so City didn't take them on, but I encourage you to get familiar with the Faster Cures work, and Health Research Alliance is also working on that. Because as patient groups, we want our dollars to go really far, and I know there's been quite a battle around somebody has a cap on indirect at 20%. And I'm not going to speak to that because I don't really know how to resolve it. But look at that bottom row, and again, patient groups saying, I don't think that academia actually understands the benefits of partnering with us. The good news is a lot of these barriers that we have listed are actually modifiable. And so putting some thought into your institutional processes and how you can actually pave a road and drive on it over and over again, I think will go quite far. And to that, patient groups, making their assets really transparent and saying, this is what we bring to a research partnership. As part of our city recommendations, I think will help. So I might, so this is a triad of stakeholder concordances between industry, patient group, and academia, and I might just hit kind of lightly on this. I have it all broken out into a number of slides, but I'll go kind of fast because you guys look like you either need a drink or you're going to fall asleep. I'm not sure. Okay, so we did a Likert scale, really trying to understand the perceptions of different stakeholders in research partnerships and what they think the value of the other partner is. So 5 is strongly agree, 1 is disagree. Again, so academia, you are in red, and the light blue is patient groups. And let me just point out, and I know it's virtually impossible to read, but one of the lowest values as far as where you thought patient groups brought value was actually designing research protocols. So our hypothesis, and one of the big things that I feel like we need to shift, is actually understanding the value that patient groups bring into designing research protocols. The very bottom one was interpreting research results. So the 2 highest were again recruitment and retention, the duh. But what I think is interesting is that patient groups had a perceived value consistently across the board. If you look at their little light blue responses of thinking that their value in research partnerships is actually higher than the other stakeholders are perceiving it to be. So I'm going to skip these 4 slides. So we did some interviews with about 10 different patient group leaders, industry, and academic investigators to really explore the successes and the failures and to try to get people to either confirm the things that we heard or give a little bit more information to us about the barriers. We confirmed pretty much all the barriers that were revealed to the survey, but people were very vocal and consistently across those 30 interviews of saying that if you don't include the patient groups in the early stages of trial design and planning, there's really no point. That is when we can have the most impact, and that is what we constantly see. Or we bring them in and we only give them a token seat at the table, meaning they really have no legitimate influence over the outcome of the clinical trial. I reviewed for PCORI, and I see this all the time, where somebody can have this really amazing graphic around the patient engagement, and we're going to bring people in, and we'll have all these focus groups. The truth is, do all of this over here, and you can tell it has absolutely no influence on what's already in the proposal. So we really need to think about that. Don't bring in a stakeholder and ask them for their feedback if they really can't actually influence anything that you're already doing. And I think people also get nailed on the, we've already developed the research question, the proposal, and it's so far well-formed that we can't back up. And then we'll go out and we'll try to get somebody to validate it. And getting a validation is better than nothing, but again, if we switch from transactional partnerships to foundational, then I think we're going to be okay. So the city recommendations will be out in the fall, and they are about 18 pages, and I've distilled that down into 3 slides, just so you can go to bed before midnight. Recommendations and development, so we've split it up for all stakeholders, patient groups, and then academic and industry investigators. So again, the first one is engage the patient voice by establishing partnerships from the beginning of the research and development program to improve clinical trial design and execution. Second is clearly define the expectations. I hear about this all the time. Well, we brought in a patient group and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Well, if you weren't real clear about what are their assets, what are their skills, what are their capabilities, what are you expecting them to do, then you're probably going to be dissatisfied. So we need to have better communication around that, but it needs to be clearly laid out, and we're not going to say you have to have an NDA or an MOU or a certain contract, because it needs to be fit for purpose, so we don't want to be that prescriptive. But think about, like, it's like a statement of work. You know, do you need to give that to somebody and have them really understand what they're expected to do? Building the trust is required for successful partnerships by being transparent, trustworthy, and following through and honoring all those commitments. And honestly, anecdotally, I've seen it more from the patient side, where you end up violating an NDA because you don't understand, or you share data because, like, we're sharers as patients. We want to share everything, or we don't know that something's embargoed, and we want to share it with our buddies. So be really clear about that. Number 4 is engage the expertise of multiple partners for a broader perspective to mitigate risk and enrich the pipeline development. So we're all going to do better if we actually don't put all of our eggs in one basket. And this is a bit of a trap, and maybe you guys feel like, you know, it's good to get in a partnership with a patient group and have them only invest in your research, but it's really not the best for research, and we still want to be innovative and competitive. So it's really smart to work with multiple partners and also understand that there are multiple patient groups in the space, and they can actually bring a number of different things. The legal and the regulatory, I'm going to skip. All right, so recommendations for industry sponsors and academic investigators is really looking across the needs of your portfolio and doing a continuous assessment of, you know, what is it that we need, and is this particular partner bringing the skills that we need, and are they following through on commitments? Being focused on matching the PG expertise and assets to the specific needs and phases of your research and development programs, because different phases of different research are going to need different things. If you are in discovery and preclinical, you're going to need the animal cell models, you're going to need the natural history. That's going to be different than somebody with a giant mailing list to recruit or a clinical trial matching service. So some organizations have everything, others don't, and think about working with multiple partners. I think I've touched upon all of this. Communicate regularly, I think, is important, even if you're enrolling your trial. Let people know that you're still enrolling. Like, okay, so these things sometimes take longer than you think, in many cases. But what happens is people come in and they help with the trial, and then they never hear from you again, and it's very unsatisfying. So just, you know, give people a heads up about what you're doing, and also patient groups can then bring in assets or go online and tweet about, hey, this, you know, we have this trial, we really need other people in it. For our patient groups, we really have focused on kind of articulating and displaying, making transparent your assets, and I will speak to that, but we also are working a lot at City on trying to get patient groups to understand what they have, get their policies in place, and so it doesn't take them 6 months to respond when somebody says, hey, we want to work with you. Really thinking about the conflict of interest, what your executive leadership has in place, working with an attorney, and basically being research ready, as we would call it. So here's what we think is going to happen. Right now, we pose a scientific question, we develop a protocol, and then we just spend months and months out there, and we throw our nets large and wide trying to find volunteers. So if we actually shift that model and we spend more of our time in the foundational things, and at City we call it quality by design, and really thinking about, is this protocol, one, is it of interest, does it answer a scientific question, will it meet unmet need? And then really the feasibility piece is so key and missed so many times that we actually think when you develop a protocol in partnership with stakeholders, that then you'll spend less time recruiting volunteers. So our project conclusions are basically that we know that partnerships are occurring in greater frequency. We know that there are modifiable barriers, and then we also know that there's anecdotal relationships or anecdotal evidence on emerging best practices, and I think when we publish our work, there will actually be, you'll see that there are some best practices now. There's more work to be done on the value metrics piece, and so we've actually launched some work around that. But the way we're approaching these recommendations, we're coming up with kind of the, I would call it the crawl, walk, run for patient groups, and saying, okay, you've only got, you know, you're a group that is 5 people, and you've got this much money, what's the first thing that you need to do? And trying to give them a menu of tools and assets, and then really teaching our sponsors to think about, these are the questions that we should be asking different patient groups, and what they can bring to the research partnership. We also thought of some things that are harder to assess, and that's relationships. So people want a good relationship with NIH, or a good relationship with FDA, or people that are, you know, going to the Hill and advocating for research funding. So we're trying to come up with some tools that actually help you think through what are the kinds of questions you should be asking. Are they engaging with the program officer? Are they involved in different divisions at NIH? And those of you that are involved in the Brain Trust or Brain Initiative, anybody been funded from Brain? Yeah, I think $46 million went out. No? Well, you should go. You should be funded, but I think patient groups are really instrumental in driving that on the White House side. So our value and metrics piece, again, we're looking at bringing our research assets from patient groups and shortening the cycle time, leveraging the assets to de-risk investment. We call it fail forward fast. We want to know what's going to fail faster. This is a decision analysis tree that I won't go into, but basically, so in our translational partnership, so we have your patient group, we have your academic investigator, and then we've got our sponsor, and they're just thinking about what am I going to have the greatest success in? If I have this many assets, how do I apply them? And if I invest these dollars here, what's the return to gain? What's the risk of a fail? And so we actually believe that patient groups, just even by doing things that improve the protocol or improve consent, will actually increase the technical success. Test Center for Study of Drug Development and their impact report, and this one I think, these statistics are from 2013, has some really awesome information around how much protocol amendments cost. And so it's an average of $500,000. And I have another probably 20 slides on it that I won't share with you. The protocol amendments are up, and basically Tufts has data that shows that most of these amendments were actually avoidable. And so we could have, Roger, are you shaking your head?
No, I was shaking my head about all the amendments.
Okay, good.
Instead of avoidable, I thought you were going to say worthless.
No,
That's the word I was waiting for.
nope, I don't have any worthless here. But anyway, so I think we have a plausible hypothesis that basically, if we all work together, we could prevent some of them, and we could save an average of $500,000, I think it was $468,000 that we were showing for phase 3 and phase 4 study amendments. And how City is going to attack that is we're basically going to hopefully survey some of you guys again and survey others and different stakeholders to say, okay, when patient groups bring these assets, what's the impact on the value driver? And so we've got revenue, cost, time, risk, and intangibles of improving the quality of lives of your patients. So this might sound like an industry thing, but I can tell you that NIH is actually thinking, if we plan a study budget and we know that engagement costs money and we want it to become foundational, how do we shift dollars in our study budgets to make sure that you guys have money to engage patients and patient groups? Because we hear it all the time that you don't. So they're actually kind of watching, where this work is going. Hopefully we'll have something good coming out of it. Okay. The city has a recruitment program that's actually going to be releasing some recommendations in the fall that will go through more specifically the kinds of questions you ask, how you sit down and how you go through a protocol, how you do the feasibility assessment. What's in the literature today, if you wanted to go actually look at this, I would look at Consuelo Wilkins' work and Yvonne Justin from Vanderbilt. They have these community engagement studios, and they've actually put a good bit of information about how they're convening different stakeholders and sitting down with a protocol and the kinds of questions that they're asking. So I think in the literature, as of today, June 23rd, just recently, this is the best thing that's actually out there. So that's how you actually engage. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of some of the things that we find in supporting patient advocates. Providing an orientation to clinical trials and the research system. This is such an acronym-driven space. I'll share just a little anecdote with you. I know we got started late, and so I'm just at the end of my time. I have a text message. Is that going to be Will saying wrapping up? Floor soon. The floor. I'm going to fall through the floor. No, because I'm getting to the end of this. So the precision medicine group that I'm working on at NIH, coming from outside NIH and not knowing how any of this works, there's actually an advisory committee and director, and I didn't know because it's ACD, and I'm ACD of PMI, W&G. So when it appears on my calendar, the first thing I see is ACD. So there was actually a double book call recently where I was supposed to be on a call with Francis Collins at 7 a.m. in the morning that I didn't know about. And I walk into my kitchen and my husband's like, your phone's ringing, over and over and over. Standing in my pajamas, I'm getting my kids ready for camp. I answer the phone and I hear somebody say, we're patching you through the meeting. And I'm like, wait, what? And then it goes live and I hear Francis Collins' unmistakable voice reading through my bio. And so I start Googling NIH, and it was, I remember it was June 12th because I'm scarred for life. And so I'm Googling, and I pull up this live webcast meeting right as Francis goes, can you give us an update on what you guys have been working on, precision medicine? So I had that moment where if you've ever like slept through a college exam, that like you're like maybe your boards or med school, I don't know, something horrific. Like I'm already a patient person, like give me a break. So, so I just started talking and nobody knew. And I hung up and I called my assistant and like I've never like this, I'm gonna be like in a rubber room sucking my thumb with a blanket like after this. So I called her and she's like, I don't know, it says ACV on your calendar. And I'm like, I don't know, it says ACV, how can we have 2 calls in one day? Well, so then I come to find out from NH, no, you're not ACV, you're ACV, PMI, WG. Great, thanks. So these are like basic things that like will ruin a relationship. Even when we bring advocates to meetings at City, and I think we prep them, if we forget the acronyms and we forget all the little language that we become really used to speaking, you'll just miss the opportunity to hear somebody's voice. There are actually some programs that I've heard about, particularly movement disorders, where they've been taking Parkinson's patients at University of Colorado Hospital. I live in the Boulder area. They've actually been taking patients and embedding them for 1 year with researchers. And so I'm thinking about the opportunities for co-learning and sharing knowledge, and then establishing an agenda that's important to all folks. And then I also think establishing these partnerships, because we don't know what we don't know. And so sometimes through the partnerships and working with people, you'll hear things from patients that you wouldn't ordinarily just get in some of our peer-reviewed literature. I always think it's important to do an orientation. I've come up with an orientation for Duke, and I think that you guys, each institution should have something so that what I was finding is that people would apply for NIH or Corey grants, and then everybody would go out and either skip the orientation phase or go create their own. And so Corey is thinking of coming up with an education. I've seen actually the rubric, but there's more as far as education modules. I just think it's probably going to be a year before we get anything done. So if you are regularly engaging with patients, share what you've got and give people some training on basic things around randomization and consent and how human research subjects are protected. The ROMP program, I think, at UCSF, they've got some great video modules you can pull down online. And then really explain a trial and explain the protocol before you ask people for feedback on it. And then be really clear about their roles, expectations, and time, and of course compensation. I'm not going to get into this too much, but train your staff and make sure that you guys have a road to drive on your institutions that are reasonable, and don't put the burden on the patient when it's really the institution that's being protected. And be sure to communicate your study results. Quick list of my pet peeves, because I think they're really fun. People calling up for a letter of support and asking me to rubber stamp something when I've never read it, I've never heard about it, they never asked me if their research is good, or hey, I need this by tomorrow, can you just send me a letter of support? Confusing the advocate for a qualitative scientist, or just assuming that the advocate will suddenly run your focus group and be like the person that gets all of the patient feedback, and then we write some report and give it to you for $100 a year or whatever you're paying us. That's great. Failing to share any background information before the calls and meetings, so we have no clue what you're talking about, is also fun. Failing to share the materials that you've already prepared and assuming that we can find them in a peer-reviewed journal. If it's already in the public space, even if you don't have time to distill it, please share it with patients. And then some of us can actually read it. But it's even better to do the layperson summary. Never hearing from researchers until they need something. And then I think I already touched upon this, bringing in a patient partner when there's really no opportunity for benefit. And then a new one I heard recently was, I'm thinking of getting a Corey award, and I said, awesome. Let's make sure in that engagement award budget we have 20 scholarships for patients for travel, which will be about probably $20,000 by the time we bring them in. But it's a $100,000 grant. How can I do that? Okay, so let me just, if that letter doesn't come tomorrow, I just want you to know. Okay. So here are my closing thoughts. I know you guys are all excited to get to bed before midnight. So the opportunities for co-learning and really improving the quality and efficiency of clinical trials have truly never been greater. So open the door and really think about what you can do to help get patients a seat at the table. Just remember, I knew nothing about this in 2008. I seriously knew nothing about research, and I don't feel like I'm some savant. I think I just was interested and I was passionate. And instead of being frustrated and angry, I had an investigator that said, why don't you take some of that anger and use it in a better way? Start now. Don't wait until you need patient partners. Let's really work on the partnerships and the foundational, switching to foundational instead of transactional. And then recognize that productive partnerships actually require care and feeding. There are no shortcuts. And with that, we can all meet the bar in like 5 minutes. Thank you.
I think we'll let people ask you questions, though.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, I think that's got to be, a world record for engaging in such productive and important stuff that results from anger. If I can only get my 6-year-old to do half of that. Right? So, all right, so raise your hand, I'll bring you the microphone.
Nobody's raising their hands. Oh, you are. I was going to say.
I wasn't going to let you down.
Thank you.
All right. So in the area where I'm doing research in neurology is multiple sclerosis, and there's been a lot of recent conversations about recruitment and inclusion of minorities in clinical trials. And so I'm just curious, when you, if you characterize the sort of diversity of these patient groups and how you address that issue from the other side of the equation.
Okay, I think we learned a lot. So on July 1st and 2nd, we had an entire workshop at NIH on participant engagement and health equity. And we had the experts on community engagement and elimination of health disparities. And these are going to be, the webcast wasn't up as of Friday, and it should be up on Monday, but it's worth your time to go back and watch some of this. But, so there are historical issues that you need to overcome. So building trust with the community, and trust resides usually in a party that is already, has a relationship with that community. So I think if you can find people that are working with minorities in that area and have trust, and you build trust with that entity, and then that trust transfers, as long as you understand the contract and you don't violate that. And it's got to be a give. You can't just take. We hear so many times, the researcher came in our community. I used to work with the homeless, and you guys probably don't know, I used to be a police officer. I was literally out on the street. I was in the community. I was like in the trenches with people. And that's where the trust, their trust resides with the people that are there every day. And so if you are going to capitalize on that trust, which I think you should, then you need to understand what they need out of it. And don't forget that piece. Now, if you're coming into a community where it's not organized and you don't already have somebody who's working on issues of MS for people that are typically underrepresented in clinical trials, then you need to make it a community issue. And you need to figure out who's having regular contact with that community. Is it pastors? Is it barbershops? Who is it? And you need to talk to them. You need to raise awareness. And we've found this time and time again, if you go out and say, this is an issue. Or did you know that this medication, so I think the Pacific Islanders great at Plavix. So they've actually got a genetic variant that makes them resistant to Plavix. So you're giving them medication that does nothing. If you actually tell them that, they're going to be mad as hell, and then they're going to want to do something about it, right? So you need to find those people that are actually respected and in the community already.
Thanks very much for an important and informative talk. My question is about balancing patient engagement for the benefit of a clinical trial design with the burden on the individual patients who are involved. I struggle with this a lot when I wonder at times when the conversation gets very technical whether we're really wasting the patient's time. How should we think about that in making decisions about when we say, please come, or this one's optional, or how we frame that?
I think I can help you with that. Are you guys familiar with Mini-Sentinel and the Sentinel program, post-market safety and surveillance for FDA from claims data, where we built a common data model? Okay, algorithms, I knew nothing about it. So I used to come to Mini-Sentinel meetings where, one, we talked about conflict of interest for 2 years, and then we built all this crazy, it's all the informatics departments building these algorithmic workarounds, trying to make data standards. I knew nothing. Here's what I did know. So I think, one, they didn't do an orientation, and they didn't really do much as far as helping me get up to speed. I just was lumped into the 200 investigators and whatever. So they didn't train me. But what I did know is listening to those calls, that those people cared and I had trusted them. So even though I didn't know anything that they were saying, I knew that they were going about it in a thoughtful way. I knew that they were respectful. I knew that I heard them putting patients first and patient needs first, even if I didn't know exactly what they were talking about. So 3 years later, I actually know a bit about the common data model. But at the time, I didn't, and I think that if you can really try to say, what can I teach this person about this? And it's gotta be, so you find somebody who's kind of interested, and then ask them, how much information do you need? Some people are gonna wanna know everything, and they'll go out and it's like they're getting their own mini PhD off on the side. Other people can come and participate and be comfortable, but you also have to stop the conversation and say, let me frame it this way. What do you think about this? And there are many times when patients will say, what, I don't feel like I have an opinion about that, but there are times when I'll say, what, you look across the record and you need to stop because I don't like what you're saying, or that's not true to patients, or we need to change that language. So, but if you don't ask, then don't just decide it's too technical and nobody cares.
Yeah, this is a fantastic talk. I have a question for you and maybe other advocacy or patient group organizations as well. My guess is that there's a pool of patients who are also either clinical trialists or physicians or whatever, right? In other words, people who have Parkinson's, etc. Are those people fantastic resources? Or are they actually not so good because they're not really representing the pool of patients that you're mostly getting at?
Okay, well, I'll take that first and we'll see what you guys say. This happens all the time, right? Okay, so what happened to me is I was research naive and knew nothing about it, and now people are like, you've got the native, as soon as I can be the bridge and I speak enough of the language over here to know what researchers are doing, now I'm native. But I think you just have to understand what's the primary lens. And at the end of the day, I work at Duke, but I will, at the end of the day, always say what I feel for patients first, even if I get fired over it, because that's my primary community. So I think if somebody is primarily a physician and then they get a diagnosis, it's no doubt going to change the way they look at life. I think Susan Love, breast cancer researcher who got leukemia, changed her life. But her process of the way she approaches research is still a researcher. So I think you just need to make space for that. And I also think in patient groups, we have some patient groups that were formed by moms at the kitchen table. I'm one of those patients where I was compelled to do something about it. There are other organizations that have, scientific PhDs, and their focus is advocacy or focus just on research, and they might not know what it's like to have experience with, living with a condition. So the lived experience, I think you can't just, toss off to the side.
So I think it's really important as the research community to have other researchers who all they do is participatory research. So they understand the whole patient engagement aspect of research, so that the participant or the PIs who are really focusing on the science are doing that, and then there's this other researcher who is engaging the patients and always the liaison when you can't always have patients in the room for every single decision that needs to be made for either design of the trial or for looking at results. But it's not a replacement. It just was helpful in the process of putting in our PCORI grant so that the person who is the researcher engaging the patients had actually not a lot of direct knowledge of the topic, but she immersed herself in the patient experience and brought in the patients, and it was useful for us since we did get a PCORI grant.
Well, okay, it was useful for you because you got a PCORI grant, but I've developed a tic, and I'm managing anger about a second. No, okay. So let's talk about that. That is a great example. And so I work on the PCORnet, and I've actually, we bring all these networks together, and we have had this just clash of worlds between the patient-powered research networks, where some of them are patient communities that went out and got an academic investigator to help them carry out their research agenda and help them have capacity to get funded. Others were clearly academic investigators who grabbed a research partner. And then we have our health systems who grabbed anybody with a P word and put one person, it's a clinical data research network. The stories are crazy, but their idea of engagement is, it's good grantsmanship if nothing else. I will submit that on any day, a patient person that has organized a community and has kept a community together and has sustained a community will go much farther than somebody who's read about engagement, because they truly know nothing about engagement. Michael J. Fox, again, I'm doing the commercial tonight, but they have focused on recruitment, retention, sustainability. What does it take to recruit a patient population? Even though they have scientific PhDs, they've got marketing people, they've done that. I think they're a good hybrid model. But in the end, we've seen it, even I think some staff members, and at Purpuri or at NIH, you hire somebody with a master's in public health who's 23 years old, they're pedigreed, they've read about patient engagement, they've written up the methodology, they've written up the science, and I just think that's not who you need to be talking to.
That's actually, yeah, so that's not who we had at our research consensus and how to put in this grant. But we did have the patients involved in all aspects of telling us their stories, and we really listened, and so it was basically that researchers are usually not trained in how to do this, and so that's why it's this last minute, well, please rubber stamp this letter of support for us, please.
So, and I also think, so as a president of the foundation and I have online communities, I have a migraine community of 2,000 patients, and I have 1,000 PFO patients. I'm not the same as all those patients, but I can tell you on any given day, okay, well, like risk benefit, I've got patients that are absolutely don't want a device in their body ever. There are patients that only want a device because they don't want to take warfarin. And so I think if you can get to that key leader that can say, because a lot of times there's only one seat on these things, right? On different boards, or bring somebody in to write a grant. Find that person that actually knows the population. But I would encourage you to find somebody who's not just looking at it from an academic model, unless you go about it in a qualitative fashion of saying, help us assess who's out there, and really being smart about how do we tease out the different patient perspectives. Yes.
I wanted to ask you a question about the development of patient-reported outcomes. Well, okay, so I can direct you to them. No, I was working with I joined someone 2 years ago who's been very involved in the Charcot-Marie-Tooth population and is working very hard in developing patient-reported outcomes by partnering with the advocacy groups and the patient groups. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit about thoughts about developing that. And the goal is to develop those before you do the research study, exactly what you mentioned before.
All right, so there's some, I'm going to need some, I need a question on you, so leave your addresses and I'm going to email you something about how to get in touch with you after this meeting. Okay. So let's talk about a patient-reported outcome. Is a patient-reported outcome something that a provider told you they thought would be important to patients, or did you work with the patient community to actually find out it's something that patients care about? And I'll tell you, they're two entirely different things. The most pressing meeting I've been to this year was the SEAL division's meeting at FDA, where they're talking about validating patient-reported outcomes. And knowing that Critical Path has been working hard for a decade and doesn't have a single validated patient-reported outcome, right? And so then they created this compendium where you've got a qualified outcome, and then you've got a validated outcome. And nobody used the word validated death, but I'm pretty sure there's one in there somewhere, because nothing ever gets to the other side. I think with Promise and with NIH tools, you have a much better opportunity to actually come up with some things that would be useful to patients. And I think it is important, because so many times patients will say, we don't care about these endpoints. And you might still need the hard clinical endpoint, but I really do think we need to be putting things in the literature and moving the field forward for patients. And if you don't ask them what's important, you're never going to know. The other thing is, and I don't think we've hit the sweet spot in the science, but different things are important to different patients. And I really, I think we struggle with figuring out what's most important to patients, but at some point I think we have the technology for a patient to actually rate what's most important to them, and then actually help tease out what's in the literature by some technology. Say, I might not care about fatigue so much, but nausea will put me under the table and I can't live with it. And letting the patient say this is what's most important. Did I talk around that, or was it just, yeah, okay.
So first of all, I want to start by saying that I'm not the only one who's been involved in some cities. Jason Connor is also here.
Oh, from Barry, yeah, that's good.
So one thing that I thought was interesting, that's sort of a theme through some of your slides, has to do with incentives. So you made lots of allusions to academics being somewhat funding-centric.
Yep.
Okay, maybe funding-centric research. You can picture companies that are trying to develop in their for-market products that are sort of they're therapy centered because there's a financial value if the therapy can be found to be effective or you can convince somebody it is. And then patient groups might be more focused on being patient centered in the sense of actually improving the quality of life or outcomes or whatever is of value to patients. And then, this is unfortunately a long preamble. Apologize for that. The place where I've seen that play out, and I'd be curious if you've seen this play out and how patient groups can help inform this dialogue, has to do with when we decide to stop kicking a dead horse, or futility analysis, where if your goal is to keep funded, you want to ignore that you're kicking a dead horse as long as possible and hide it from your funder. If you're a single product company, you want to hide it as long as possible from your venture capitalists. But if you're either a multi-product company or maybe someone actually interested in developing something for the community in which you're a member, you actually want to, as soon as you know you're kicking a dead horse, move your resources and your focus to whatever is the next best option. So my question is whether or not you've seen patient groups help inform that dialogue in an effective way, or how we can move in that direction.
So I'm going to throw in one first thing, and I'll get back on the path. But the FNIH survey, by the way, so we just talked about incentives for industry, academia, and patient groups. Public was return of information and results. They wanted everything. They wanted lab results. They wanted their genome. They wanted everything, and that's what they felt was incentive to participate in research. So let me move that over to the side. I think on my slides earlier, we were saying the best practice is actually don't put your eggs in one basket as a patient group and then fail forward fast. And while it really sucks when I'm in the field where everything has failed, like in PFO, there's no huge or failure. Every single trial, and venture capitalists are doing everything they can to actually hide that and make sure nobody knows about it. But the truth is, as far as the science, as a patient group, we got to look at something else, right? I think you need to be honest, and also in academia, you're struggling because I know you guys are trying to get funding. I know that your jobs are dependent on it. I know you put out probably 100 proposals and maybe 10 get funded, and you spend months writing this stuff. And it's, but I think we're about to have also a shift in disease, and I don't know if this helps you, but I think we're starting to see that it's not just one receptor, and it's funny because we're talking about it, precision medicine, how do we shift the whole incentive and promotion structure? And so I've got people that are really super bright, and they're like, well, my mentor told me to get into this space and then do the deep dive on this one receptor and be the expert on it, and then publish on this one phenotype and make sure that I know everything about it. And somehow I think we have to upset that whole system, because if your entire career is based on this one little thing and it's dead, well, what do you do, right? That's bad. So there are smart people that need to work on more than one thing, but I don't think that's the model. So maybe we need to have some working groups around that. But I'm also seeing that it's not just going to be that one thing. When we start seeing patients that their cell types are more we're, as patient groups even, we're organized around body part and by disease. And the truth is, sometimes we've got people with pancreatic cancer that have something that looks more like a renal cell tumor. What are we going to do now? Who's your patient group now? We don't have a non-squamous cell whatever group. So, I think we're going to have to rethink all of medicine. But academia, I think it's a scary time. Sorry. Yes.
So first of all, I'll say this is a great talk, and I think it's a great way to start the week for everyone, so thank you.
Thank you.
I was hoping that you would spend a minute talking about what the partnership looks like in the dissemination of data phase.
Are you talking about writing layperson summaries or sharing clinical trial data, or?
So the trial's over, it's either futile or one group did better than the other, and now, more than just presenting it at a scientific meeting, which is what we do, right? And more than that one splash that you get in the press, how do we actually engage all these people that really care about this and continue to move the information out to the people who it's going to impact the most?
So I think patient groups are honest brokers, and I think we want to know where there's success and where there's failure. And if patient groups don't approach it with that lens, you need to work with a different patient group, right? Like we should want our patients to know everything. On this slide, and actually in the survey that we did, the news is that researchers actually felt like patient groups have a role in disseminating. But I think it doesn't take that long. You don't have to be an expert to write a layperson summary of your research findings. And if your clinical research office or your communications office could look at your New England Journal publication and come up with something and make it palatable, because they're doing it for the press release anyway. Make it a habit to send that out to the patient group, or start your own blog or tweet it and make sure that it links to something. We read stuff all the time, but that information has to go out. And honestly, if I go click on a journal, and even at Duke sometimes, if we have to order something, and then I look at something personally that we don't have, and it's $60 an article, and I gotta go download it? Probably not. So I think we can do a better job, and it's not a huge, we make it out like it's a big thing, and we gotta go hire a firm to write a layperson summary. But it would behoove researchers, I think, in general, to start even about, the protocol that you're putting in, or whatever your proposal is. Come up with the abstract. Of course, making people do that, or you should, even if it's highly technical. We need to know why it's important to us. I'm working on some heterogeneity and treatment effect work, and it is well above my head mathematically, but I know that I'm an individual patient, and I don't want to be treated on a law of averages. And I know that I've been, the extraordinary responder, and I know I've also had a million adverse events that they said only happen to 1%. So I can wrap my mind around that if you can distill it and give me something, anything.
Thanks so much for a really interesting talk. I'm just wondering if in your work you've come across any patient-centered issues around blinding or being randomized to arms that you know as a patient are ineffectual.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this is the foundational nature of sitting down with patient groups. And so in my brain, we have tons of placebo. Right? I was in a double-blind randomized study. I get why it needed to be randomized, except for that the blinding part. So I had a right heart cath. People were put to sleep, and then when you woke up, you didn't know if you had a device in your heart for a year. The first second I bent over, I knew I had one. So did we put people through that for no good reason? That would have been smart to work with people. There is a huge, I hear at every meeting with patient groups that they don't. So I think there's a thing where people think that standard of care is less than what they would have gotten from an experimental arm of therapy. So I think if we start actually doing some type of outreach with patients in public, I call it the prep and prime, about research in general, then we'll have an opportunity to help explain. And if you don't have the opportunity to do that, this is where patient groups come in. If you're working with them, I might not need to know all the ins and outs of a clinical trial, but if I know Michael J. Fox Foundation put their name on it and they worked with somebody to design it, I know they have my best interest at heart. I know my patient group does too. But patients, as far as, there's a lot of push as far as they want just a single arm study, but when you start explaining to patient groups and saying, this won't be as strong, or we won't really be able to answer the scientific question, I think National Breast Cancer Coalition's done an excellent job. They've been unpopular many times by saying, nope, this needs to be a randomized controlled trial, even though people are like, well, they're dying, They've really said we can't answer that question and that's not right. But trust relies in that group.
All right, I think, Jason, you will be the last question, and we'll sort of break up, let people go to the bar, and then have the more organic mixture of everybody, because I know that you have to get on an airplane at 4 a.m.
Yeah, so that brings up a good question with, I know the National Breast Cancer Coalition actually trains their advocates scientifically, and you can get credentialed as, having greater than, a layperson knowledge of that. Which is great, and which allows that group to advocate for sort of higher scientific standards. Are there maybe groups like that, or is there training for patients maybe who are part of a smaller community that obviously don't have the resources of the NBCC to train patients to be conversant on DMCs, on these other groups, what trials mean, why we blind, things like that?
All right, so I have 2 thoughts on that. One is that it's been a huge gap. We've talked about it before. I know you're on the CTAP, right, the Clinical Trials Advisory Panel. We've come up with the modules that we need. Because what's happening is there can be, breast cancer in particular, they have excellent training. Parkinson's Disease Foundation has great training for advocates. But we can have some disease agnostic training about what's a clinical trial, what's randomization. Even if we put it all together on a menu. So let's say we have this gap and not every patient group knows about research and they're going to be able to come up with their own research advocacy training. I think it's absolutely worth your time and resources. If you can't do that, you guys as individual investigators can actually make a dent in that. You give talks all the time. How long does it take you to record a 1-hour webinar and post it somewhere and then share the link and the patient group can send it out on Facebook or on Twitter, put it in their online community. So just start recording your own lecture series and be really smart about, I mean, it should be in your informed consent already about a lot of these things, and it should be broken down into language that patients should be able to process. But, don't wait for patient groups to come solve your problems. I would encourage you to do what you can. And I think doing a webinar is pretty low-hanging fruit.
All right, with that, I'd like to thank Bray Patrick-Lake for her great presentation. In some respects, I think we could end the course and it would be a success. As I think we really accomplished quite a bit here and learned a lot. So, in a more sort of procedural manner, at 7:30 tomorrow, the faculty are going to meet, and I'm going to go through some things with them. You will be able to get your breakfast and bring them into the room indicated on the program. The sessions, both the foundations track and the advanced track, will start promptly at 8. So I'll make sure that everybody, and when you landed here, if you didn't drive here, Detroit, Michigan is in the Eastern time zone, like over and over at the airport. So we are the Eastern time zone. So the current time is 8:56. So again, we have the room for a bit longer. So I really want to encourage everybody to mingle and organically meet with some of the representatives we have here tonight from the patient groups. And again, thank you for coming, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the course.